Thank you very much for joining us today despite your occupied schedule. We would like to start the Toyota Motor Corporation's financial result announcement for the period ending in March 2022. First of all, let me introduce to you the members present for this briefing. Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, Kenta Kon. Executive Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, Masahiko Maeda. Chief Communication Officer, Jun Nagata. And Accounting Group Chief Officer, Masahiro Yamamoto. Now, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, Yamamoto will share with you the overview of the financial results. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Masahiro Yamamoto. We would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to our customers around the world who chose us, as well as our shareholders, dealers, and suppliers who support us. We would like to express our sincerest gratitude to all the stakeholders. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused to our customers due to the recent production volume reduction. We will work hard to deliver our product as soon as possible. First, let me explain the summary of our performances for the fiscal year ended March 2022. Under the production constraints due to the spread of COVID-19 and semiconductor shortages, dealers, suppliers, and production sites have all worked tirelessly in order to deliver as many cars as possible to customers. Despite soaring materials prices and increase in expenses for the investment in new business fields, we achieved growth in revenue and profits thanks to cost reduction and marketing efforts. This is attributable to the improvement of our revenue structure, which we have been working on for a long time towards one that is not dependent on foreign exchange rates and volumes. As for the forecast, we have set our production volume assumption to an appropriate level, having safety and security as our top priority. We expect a decrease in our operating income due to unprecedented increases in materials and logistics costs. However, we'll continue with our future investments and promote our various activities. As for the shareholder return, the year-end dividend is 25 yen per share and maintain a steady increase. Share purchases will be up to 200 billion yen, including 100 billion yen set aside to enable more flexible share repurchases than before, while considering share price levels. Let me explain our performance for the fiscal year ending in March 2022. Consolidated vehicle sales for the period was 8.23 million units, which was 107.6% of the consolidated vehicle sales for the same period of the previous fiscal year. Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales was 9.512 million units, 104.7% of the same sales of the same period of the previous year. The ratio of electrified vehicles was 28.4%. The consolidated financial results for this fiscal year were sales revenue 31,379.5 billion yen, operating income 2,995.6 billion yen, income before income taxes 3,990.5 billion yen, and net income of 2,850.1 billion yen. I would like to explain the factors that impacted operating income year on year. First, the effects of foreign exchange rates increased operating income by 610 billion yen. Second, cost reduction efforts decreased operating income by a net of 360 billion yen. This consisted of 280 billion yen increase due to cost reduction efforts and 640 billion yen decrease due to the impact of soaring material prices. Third, marketing efforts increased operating income by 860 billion yen, largely due to the increase in sales volume and improved earnings in the financial services business. Finally, an increase in expenses decreased operating income by 220 billion yen. As a result, excluding the overall impact of foreign exchange rates and swap valuation gains and losses, and other factors, operating income increased by 280 billion yen year-on-year. As shown here, the operating income for each region increased year-on-year in all regions. This is largely due to the impact of foreign exchange rates, cost reduction, and marketing efforts. Next, let me explain your business in China as well as the financial services business. As for business in China, both the operating income of consolidated subsidiaries as well as our share of profit of equity method affiliates increased mainly due to the impact of foreign exchange and marketing efforts. Regarding the financial services business, operating income excluding swap valuation gains and losses for the fiscal year increased year-on-year, largely due to the increase in the lending balance and margins. Next, let me explain the return to shareholders. We plan to make a year-end dividend of 28 yen per share. We will continue to aim to pay stable and sustainable dividends while maintaining and improving upon our consolidated dividend payout ratio in the medium to long term in order to reward shareholders who hold their shares over the medium to long term. As for share repurchases, we set the maximum limit to 200 billion yen, including 100 billion yen set aside to enable more flexible share repurchase than before while considering share price levels. Aiming at enhancing capital efficiency, we plan to implement share repurchases in a flexible manner, taking into account various factors including investment in growth, dividend levels, cash on hand, and share price levels.
Next, I will explain the forecast for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Consolidated vehicle sales is expected to be 8,850,000 units, which is 107.5% of the previous fiscal year, with growth in sales expected in all regions. As for Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales, it is expected to be 9,900,000 units, which is 104.1% of the previous fiscal year. As for electrified vehicles, by improving our product lineup to better meet customers' needs in each region, sales are expected to be 3,070,000 units, which is 113.6% of the previous fiscal year. We expect that the ratio of electrified vehicles will amount to 31.0% of vehicles sold. Towards carbon neutrality, we will continue to make efforts to provide a wide range of options to meet the needs of each region and hence be selected by customers in those regions. Next, let me explain the forecast for the full-year consolidated financial performance. We have adopted forex rate assumptions of 115 yen per US dollar and 130 yen per euro. Based on this, our forecast for the full-year consolidated financial performance are sales revenues 33 trillion yen, operating income 2,400 billion, income before income taxes 3,130 billion yen, and net income of 2,260 billion yen. Next, I would like to explain the factors that impacted operating income. First, the effects of foreign exchange rates are expected to increase operating income by 195 billion yen. Second, cost reduction efforts are expected to increase profits by 300 billion yen, while the impact of a sharp increase in materials cost is expected to be 1,450 billion yen, resulting in a total decrease of 1,150 billion yen. Marketing efforts are expected to increase operating income by 815 billion yen, largely due to the increase in sales volume. Finally, an increase in expenses is expected to decrease operating incomes by 440 billion yen. Although we continue to face a difficult business environment, we will continue to further improve our profit structure and accelerate our efforts to transform into a future mobility society. This concludes my presentation on the financial results. Next, EVP Mr. Kon will talk about changes in profit structure. I am Kenta Kon. Although the results for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2022 are for a single fiscal year, they represent the accumulation of improvements so far in our profit structure. So I would like to add a few words from that perspective. These graphs compare the change in our operating income in the year of the 2009 global financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic last year, in each case compared to the previous year. In both cases, sales volume decreased by 15% compared compared to the previous year. But at the time of the global financial crisis, profits decreased significantly, pushing Toyota into the red, while in the fiscal year ended March 2021, we were able to secure a profit. This shows the break-even volume for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2009 onward. If we assign our break-even volume at the time of the global financial crisis a value of 100, we have lowered our break-even volume most recently to the 60 to 70 range, demonstrating that we have made significant progress in improving our condition over the past 13 years. This was not something that could be done overnight. Immediately after the global financial crisis, we had to put the brakes on all of our R&D expenditures and capital investments. We could not do any investments in the future. But while overcoming the numerous crises known as the six hardships, such as our quality crisis, we continuously worked to improve our profitability. Improved profitability was not something that Toyota was able to achieve on its own. Rather, it was the result of a desperate and concerted effort with all of our stakeholders. To them, we say thank you. During that period, as one of Toyota's strengths is having a full lineup of products globally, we shifted to an in-house company system that would allow us to provide high-quality and reasonably priced vehicles at the right place and time to an even higher degree. Along with the in-house company system, we introduced a Toyota Global Architecture, or TNGA, a shared vehicle platform to improve the basic performance and product appeal of our vehicles and enhance the reflection of regional characteristics with the aim of not being the best in the world but the best in town. In the past, we often introduced completely new vehicle models on a one-off basis as the market grew. But now we are continuously evolving our long-time best-selling cars, such as the Yaris and Corolla, to keep them current so that they can go on being long-time bestsellers. We believe that this has resulted in our being able to increase profitability. I would like to explain the changes in our profit structure over the past 6 years since we transitioned to our in-house company system. Looking at the factors behind increases and decreases in operating income, our profit has increased despite major negative factors such as foreign exchange rates, sales volume, and increases in materials prices. In terms of sales, our greater than 2 trillion yen improvement in profit is due to sales price revisions and a reduction in selling expenses. We believe that this is a result of our customers highly evaluating our products. Also, both sales vehicle quality helped customers maintain high vehicle value, leading to improved profitability not only in the automotive business but also in the financial services business. In terms of cost improvements, we believe that significant improvements have been achieved by the effect of switching to new products that are based on the TNGA platform and through the power of our production work sites, including those of suppliers, which can respond to the launch of various new products and environmental changes, as well as produce high-quality products. We used to increase profit through foreign exchange rates and volume growth, but this has certainly changed over the past 6 years. Comparing 2015 and 2021, we have increased our market share for new car sales in 11 of the 15 major countries, including China, the United States, and Japan. The graph on the right shows the buy model used car prices in the U.S. 3 years after purchase. Our RAV4 has received higher appraisals than vehicles by other manufacturers in the same segment, and it is evident that those appraisals have gotten even higher since we switched to the TNGA-based RAV4. Being able to command a high price in the used car market protects the value of customers' owned assets, and we believe this is building trust in our brand. Our in-house company system, best-in-town activities in each region, TNGA, product lineup strategies, the creation of ever-better motorsports-bred cars, and the human resource development that supports these activities, as well as various in-house system reforms. As mentioned, although our performance in the fiscal year just ended represents our situation for a single fiscal year, it is the result of efforts that have been ongoing for a long time, and we would like to once again thank everyone involved for their support. Many customers are currently waiting for a long time for delivery of their vehicles. We would like to take this opportunity to apologize again. This concludes my explanation. Thank you.
ただいまより質疑応答を
From
開始い
here
たし
on,
ます
we。would like to open the
ご質
floor
問のある
for
方は画
discussion
面上の手を
Q&A.
挙げる
If
の
you
ボ
have
タ
a
ンを押してくだ
question,
さい。
please press
こちら
raise
からお名前をお
hand
呼びしますので、マイ
button
クと
on
カ
the
メラをオンに
screen,
してご発
and
言
when
を
your
お願いいたし
name
ます。
is
な
mentioned,
お、恐
please
縮です
turn
が、
on
なる
the
べく多くの
microphone
皆
and
様
also
か
the
らのご質
camera.
問をお受けするた
We
め、
would like to
ご
receive
質問はお
questions
一
from
人
as
2
many
問まででお
people
願いい
as
たします。
possible, so please ask only the
それで
maximum
は、
of 2
日刊
questions,
自動
no
車
more
新
than
聞
2
福井
questions.
様、お願いい
Mr.
たします。
Fukui of
画面を
Automotive
切り替えま
Journal,
すので、
Daily
ご自
Journal.
身の映像が画面上に表示されました
We
ら
will
ご発言
switch
く
the
ださい。
screen, and once you see yourself on the screen, please start your question.
それでは福井様、お願いいたし
So,
ます。
Mr. Fukui, please. Fukui of Automotive Daily Journal, can you hear me? Mr. Fukui, your voice is quite low. Could you once again repeat it yourself?
マイクを、
Could you
ですか。聞こえますでしょうか。
can you hear me?
お願いい
Yes,
た
we
します。
can. Yes, thank you.
まずはちょっと
First of all,
終わった期の決算の受け
with
止めに
respect
ついて
to
教えて
the
ください。
assessment of the
売上
financial
高が
results of the fiscal year just ended, the sales revenue is 31 trillion yen, and the operating income is around 3 trillion yen, both record high levels. And with respect to those good financial results, how do you assess that? What is your view of that? The second question is as follows. Due to the soaring raw materials prices and cost improvement efforts, according to the information published in the period fiscal year ended, the soaring impact of soaring raw materials prices was 640 billion yen, and for the current period it's already 1.55 trillion yen. Mr. Kon has been talking about 300 billion yen to improve operating income through cost improvement efforts. But I think the soaring raw materials prices is so high that cannot be covered by the further cost reduction. Is there any further room for cost reduction? And including Tesla, overseas manufacturers are increasing their prices. What is your approach to passing on higher raw materials costs to the final prices? Thank you, Mr. Fukui. With respect to the good results of financial results of the fiscal year ending in March 2022, that will be explained by Mr. Kon, EVP, the assessment of that. And for the fiscal year just ended, as the raw materials prices soared, what are we going to do with the cost improvement efforts? Mr. Yamamoto will respond to that. And with respect to pricing, Nagata will respond to that aspect of the question. So first, may I ask Mr. Kon to respond to the first aspect? Thank you, Mr. Fukui, for your question. With respect to our assessment of the fiscal year just ended, earlier, I made additional comments in the presentation, and as reflected there in the fiscal year just ended in March 2022, in terms of the financial results for the full year of that. But up until that particular moment, over 13 years altogether, we made accumulated efforts, which brought down the break-even units, and that reduced the break-even units, and that is the major driver of this financial results. This is the financial results achieved in a single year. So it is just 1 year. Over many years that we continue to make efforts. So it depends on the economic conditions prevailing in any fiscal year. It's reflected in those numbers, but on the foundation and basis of that is not just the initiatives and activities pursued in that particular fiscal year, but the accumulated efforts for improving profit structure pursued over many years. So in that sense, the fact that we've been able to make this financial results could indicate that good results of our efforts to improve our operating structure is reflected and manifest in that. As I said, the financial results reflect the efforts of a single year, but in terms of a production gemba, every day they are engaged in production activities which produce a certain number of units. Sometimes the line is stopped, or at other times efficiency might suffer. So in that sense, the books are closed every single day. So every effort is made to achieve a better results tomorrow than today, and maybe even better results after that. And those efforts pursued over 13 years or so is reflected in the financial results. we have suffered from the impact of raw materials or Omicron variant of COVID. But I think the most important factor and characteristics of this financial results was the continued and accumulated efforts over many years for improving operating structure. That's my assessment of the financial results. Thank you. With respect to cost reduction efforts, if you could refer to slide 16, maybe. Thank you. Yes. 2.4 trillion yen, aiming at that, this shows the waterfall show. It shows negative 1.45 billion yen. That is the soaring materials, and 300 billion yen achieved through the cost reduction efforts, and also from that subtraction of 1.45 trillion yen of soaring raw materials place. And therefore, to continue making efforts to achieve around 300 billion yen in cost improvement efforts, manifestation is something very difficult, but what we have been continuing to do will continue to be pursued going forward. And when the raw materials prices are very high and soared, what sort of materials should we be using is a new aspect that we will consider. So that might represent a certain perspective from which the cost improvement efforts can be continued. So every day probably we can find those new seeds for cost improvement. Lastly, with respect to the efforts to pass on higher cost prices, and let me respond to that. Overall, within Toyota, one of the characteristics of a Toyota is to have the operation of full lineup, both the passenger cars and commercial vehicles on the global side level. So we are operating globally with the full lineup of our products, and therefore in each region we have many different customers in different segments, and we are trying to satisfy those differing needs in a very fine-tuned manner every day. So from that perspective, the products are planned and pricing is made. So there are a variety of customers, different types of customers in that. Because of the soaring raw material prices, sometimes there may be a segment from whom we may be able to receive a higher consideration, but at the same time, there are other segments of customers who need and who use vehicles as means of transportation, as a work vehicle. So from those customers, even if the raw materials prices soared and increased, trying to increase the prices charged to those customers would represent a very difficult thing to do. And as Kon mentioned earlier, for products, we focus on regional differences and different product lines. So in each region, for each lineup of products, where can we set higher prices, or where is it very difficult to change prices, those will be closely examined before decision is made. And that is what we keep in mind even in the current context. And if I may further add, one of the characteristics of Toyota as an OEM, we have the Crown or the Corollas or Hi-Ace. In a sense, there are so-called long-selling brands, and we have so many of those long-selling vehicles. That's one of the characteristics of Toyota as an OEM. And those brands are really enjoying patronage of many customers belonging to many segments. And therefore, for customers with respect to product strength and the pricing, they have a certain level of a market level they keep in mind. So we need to satisfy those expectations, meet those customers' expectations. And therefore, even if inflation has set in to increase price, we'll simply cannot satisfy those customer needs and expectations. So including that aspect, and as Mr. Yamamoto mentioned, we will continue to improve cost not on a single year basis, but also over many years, so that we can meet customers' expectations as much as possible. That's our approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Fukui. Now let us move on to the next question. From Asahi, Kondo-san, please. We will switch the screen, so when you see yourself on the screen, please start your question.
はい、それでは近藤様お願いいたします。
Mr. Kondo, please.
朝日新聞近藤です。
From the Asahi Shimbun newspaper, my name is Kondo.
一問目の質問と若干重なる部分はあるんですけども、
This question is related to the first question.
23年3月期今期なんですけども、
The year ended
原材料高のインパクトなんですけども、前期を超えてですね、か
The
なり
impact of raw
増収となっ
material
ています。
cost is much
こちら
higher
の
than the previous
指
year.
標をどう見ているのか、
So,
また足元円
what is
安も
your
重なってい
perspective
る
on
の
the
で、
market
為
conditions?
替の絡み
And
もあ
in
る
the
んじゃな
short
いかなと
term,
思います
the
が、そ
yen
こら辺のちょっと
is
ご
weaker,
解説
so
いただき
there
たい
may
の
be an
と、
impact of
ま
forex.
た
So, can you
取
tell
材
us
してい
your
ると
view
です
on
ね、
that? And
裾野のサプライチェーン
when
です
we
ね、
do our
白崎さん
reporting,
か
if
ら
you look
原
at
材料高で契約
the
されている
supply
ところなんか
chain,
も聞きますけれども、サプライチェーンの支援とか分配について
with
どんな
regards
ふう
to
に考えてい
supply
るか、一
chain
問目教えてください。
assistance, support,
あと
and
もう一問ですけれ
distribution,
ども、2
what
点
is
目
your
です。
view? That is my
世界
first
生産、
question.
グ
And
ロ
the
ーバル
second
生産
question,
の絡みなんですけども、
in relation to
前
global
期ですね、
production,
当
last
初
year,
930万台で計
initially
画を行って
9.3
まし
million
て、
was the
その後見
plan,
直しが
and
相
after
次いで
that,
着地
review
は
that plan,
857ぐ
and
らいだったと思うん
ultimately
で
you
すけど
had
も、
about
今期
8.57
23
million.
年3月期、
For
970万台
this
とかなり
year,
高い数字になってますけども、
9.7 million, which is
半
very
導体不
high.
足なんかがある中です
There
ね、
was a
この
shortage of
970といっ
semiconductors,
たその
and
根
yet
拠や理由、
9.7
あるいは
million
で
is
す
the
ね、
number
昨
you
日には
have.
ですね、
Why do you
中
have
国から
this
の部
number?
品不足で
And
国内工場
because
の
of
一部稼
price
働停
shortage
止なんか
from
の話もあり
China,
ました
some
が、
of your
ゼロ
production
コロナなん
sites
かも
in
含めたですね、
Japan is going to
リスクについて
suspend
の認識も
production.
教えていただける
So
とあ
what
りが
is
たいです。
your
以上よろしくお願いします。
perspective on the risk with related to the
はい、近藤様ありがとうございま
Chinese
した。
zero
最初の質問の
COVID policy.
資材高騰の指標
Thank you
をどう見
very
るのか、
much.
それからもう一
First,
つの
your
そうい
first
ったこと
question
も
was
含め
about the
てサ
soaring
プラ
raw
イ
material
サプライヤーさんに
prices.
対してどう対応
And
していくの
second,
かっていう点でござい
how
ます。
are we
これは
going to
セッション
respond
の今から
to our
ご説明申し上げます。
suppliers? That will
そ
be
れからもう
explained by
2点目に
Mr.
ご質問あ
Kwon,
り
the
ました今期
EVP. And your second
970万
question,
台の生産
9.7
に対
million
し
for
て
this year
どういう根拠でやっていくの
production.
か、これは昨日発
What
表
is
しま
the
した
basis
中
for
国の
this?
サプライ
Was
チェ
the
ーン影響
question.
の生産の停止、こんなこともある
Because of
中
the
でっていう
Chinese
ことも
supply
加
chain,
味
the
しながら
production
回答してほ
is
しい
going
と
to
いう
be
ことだと思います。
suspended, and you would like to have that included in our response. So, Mr. Yamamoto will respond to that second question.
はい、近藤さんありがとうございます。
Thank you very much to Mr. Kondo.
原材料価格市況変動
First about the raw material price and the market conditions. 1.45 trillion yen, as you mentioned, it is unprecedented.
終わった期のですね6400億円という影響も
640 billion last year was the highest ever impact, and this year it's more than twice that number, so the impact was very high.
これまずこれ私ども仕入れ先さんとの間ではですね、
with our
大体
suppliers,
材料の価格については
with regards to raw material prices, in principle, Toyota will bear the burden. That is the basic rule.
それに基づいて
And based
グ
on
ローバ
that
ル
rule,
でどれぐらいの影響があるか
globally, how much impact there will be,
相場
taking into consideration short-term market,
いくらぐらいトヨタで負担をするこ
and
とになる
how
であろう
much
かということを見積も
Toyota
った数字でございます。
should bear the burden. That was
円
calculated.
安の方がかなり影響がある
In the short
では
term,
ないか
the
というこ
weaker
とだったん
yen
ですけれ
may
ども、
have a major
実際には
impact you
この
mentioned,
1兆4500
but
億円の
1.45 trillion, if you look at the breakdown, about half of
海外
that
の
comes
事業体での
from
影響
global
まずで
affiliates,
ございます。
subsidiaries and
あと残り
affiliates,
が日本の
and
事業体
the
での影響という
remainder
ことになるん
comes
ですけれ
from
ども、
the Japanese
特に
business.
円安がですね、
In particular,
こ
with
れに大き
the
な
weaker yen,
影響があってこの市況の数字が大きくなったっていうことはあまりそういう認識はございません。
we don't think had a major
それからです
impact
ね、
on the
仕入れ
results.
先さんこれ1兆4500億こういった資材のイン
Suppliers,
フレの状況は
1.5 trillion
やはり
yen, the impact
OEM
of
とか仕
raw
入れ先さん
material
とかって
prices
いう区別というよりも一体となって
impacts
ですね、それみん
both
なで
OEMs and
これをどうやっ
suppliers.
て
So we have to
対
work
応していく
together
か
to
という
respond
ことを考えて
to the
実行していかなきゃいけない
situation. And we have to think
というふう
together
に思っておりま
and
して、
implement the
やは
necessary
り
measures
先ほど山
together.
本本部長も申し上げたよ
As
う
Mr.
に、
Yamamoto
材
mentioned,
料が上がっているということです
the
の
raw material
で、その
prices
使用
have
量
gone
を
up.
できるだけ
So
少なくする取り
the
組み
amount of raw materials
ですとか、
used
そ
should
の材料を
be
より安価な
reduced
材
to
料
the
に
extent
変える
possible. And
よう
when
な取り組み
possible,
み
we
たいな
should
ことをです
use
ね、やっぱりやっていかなきゃいけない
lower
というふうに
cost
思います。
material.
も
Those
ちろ
are
ん
measures that have to be
もう一つ
taken.
やっぱり 車の開発生産販売者としては
Vehicle
ですね、
development
よりお
and
客様に付加価
production
値を
and
い
sales
た
is
だけ
done
る
by
よう
our
な
company, and
商品開
therefore
発
we have
み
to
たいなも
develop
のでですね、
products that
や
offer
っ
higher
ぱり
value
お
to
客
the
様にも
customers.
普及をしていくと。
So
一律に値上げということではなくて、
rather than just
やはりこ
simply
う
raising the
さらに
prices,
企業努力をしてですね、
we have to make further
商
efforts
品
as
開
a
発をしてい
company
くと。
in
やはり
product
単年度
development.
で1兆4500億を
In a
すべて
single
吸収
year,
できるということではないと思いますが、
1.45 trillion. That cannot be totally absorbed in a single year. So even if it may take time, we have to take solid steps and measures so that in several years' time,
競争力を維持できる。
we will maintain or improve our competitiveness in the market.
年間3000億の原価改善
Cost reduction of 300 billion per year
生活動ですとか、先ほど申し上げたような活
have
動
to be
でぐっ
achieved
とやっ
through
ぱり力を入
SSA
れていかなきゃいけない
activities.
こと
We
は
have
事実だと思い
to
ますので、
make further
本当に
efforts
危
in
機感を持
these
って
areas. So we have a
やっ
sense
て
of
まいりたいというふう
crisis,
に思います。
and we do realize that we have to continue these efforts.
以上でございます。
That's all from my side.
はい。2点目の生産台数につい
The
て
second point was
です
about
ねご回答いたし
the
ます。
production volume.
確かに昨年ですね、
Last
計
year,
画に対する減産というのは
against
本当に
the
度
plan,
重なる状
the
況が続き
production
まして、
volume was
それ
lower,
でも
and we
本当に
repeated
一台
that
一台の
several
車
times.
を
And
気持ちを
each,
込めて作ろうという
but still, we wanted to produce
現場、
each
その制
vehicle
作の皆さんも含めてです
with
ね、
all
本
our
当に
efforts and
感
passion.
謝を申し
The
上げます
people at the
し、
Gemba
そういう
all
結
worked
果だ
very
と思
hard,
い
and
ま
I would
す。
like to
で
thank
今
everybody for those
年の今
efforts.
の計画を970万台と
This
い
year's
う
plan,
この数字に対して
9.7 million,
ご質問いただいたと思っていま
and
す。
I think that was the point of your
も
question.
ともと1月の内示の時にですね、
In
1100万
January,
台というふうに
11 million
計画を出させていただいてからの
was the unofficial
970
plan
万台
that
な
we
んですけれど
announced,
も、
and that was
本当
changed
に
to 9.7
この
million.
昨年の状況を踏まえてですね、やはり
Taking into consideration
大
the
事なことは
situation last
安
year,
全と
what
品
is
質をしっかり
important
守り
is
ながら、
safety and
一台一台の車を
quality
生産活動を続けてい
being
くという
protected
こと
and
の
continue to
しっかりと
produce
その原点に立
each
ち直って
vehicle.
も
We
う
have
一度見
to
直
go
してみ
back
ようと
to
いうこと
those
で、
basics.
この970万台という計画、ただこれもまだ
With
先々どうな
that
るか分かりま
thinking,
せん
we
ので、
came up with
これを基
9.7
準
million.
に
We don't know what will
こ
happen
の
to this
1年
number
間
in the
進めてい
future,
くことになる
but
と
that
この中には
is the approach
コロ
for
ナの
the
影
next
響です
year.
とか、また半導体今年どれだけ
COVID-19's
今現時点
impact
分かっているのかということを
How much
盛り込んだつもりでございます。
semiconductors can be
本当
procured
に
this year have been
現
taken
場
into
の方に
consideration.
もお伺いしたんですけれども、
We asked the people on the
急な
Gemba,
減産というのは本当にその
sudden reduction in
仕事が
production
なくなってしまって、
means they have
別
no
の仕
work
事に行ってしまってですとか、
and
そ
they
の
may be
人の入れ替えがあるだと
switched
か、そういう補
to
充ですとか、また
works,
部品が
and
余
there
ってし
may
まった
be
りだとか、置き場がない
replacement
と
of
か、
people,
本当に大
people
変な
people
ご苦労
changes
を
and
していただいているということ
they
を
have made
お伺いし
or
ました。
gone through a
やは
lot
り
of
こうやって
struggles.
前々から少しずつその計画がですね、
The
早めにお伝えできれば、そうすれ
if the
ば
plan can be
急に
conveyed
止める
to
こともなく、例えば
the
タクト
people
タイムを下げ
earlier,
て、そうすれば今いる人たちが
for example, by
その
reducing
まま
takt time,
仕事ができて、
the
で
people
少し
on
手の空
the
いた人たち
Gemba
は
can
改善活
continue
動
to
をして
work,
と
and
いう
if
よ
they
うな
have
こと
some
で、やは
spare
り
time, they can work on Kaizen
社長
activities.
社長の今度冒頭の説明にもありましたけれど
As
も、
Mr. Kwon
やっぱ
mentioned
人
at
材
the
育成ですよ
outset,
ね。この人材育成を
human
ずっと続けられ
resource
て
development
これるっていうこの体質改善の源っていうのもやはりこの現場にあると
will
思ってい
have
ま
to
して、
continue, and
そう
the
いう意味で
Gemba
は
people have
この生産
that mentality of
台数
continuing
こ
human
の活動に
resources
ついては
development.
そういったことも含めてやっていくことになるのではないかなと
So
思います。以
that
上です。
will continue to be kept in mind as we proceed with production
近藤様、あり
activities.
がとうございました。
Thank you very much
それでは
to
次のご
Mr.
質問に参
Kondo.
ります。
We would like to move on to the next question from 中日白石さん。
画面を切り替えますので、
I
ご自
will
身の映像が
switch
画
the
面上に
screen,
表
so
示され
if
ま
you
したら
see
ご発
yourself
言
on
く
the
ださい。
screen, please start your question.
ただいま画面を切り替えてお
We
り
are
ます。
now trying to switch the screen.
中日新
Shiraishi of Chunichi newspaper. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. I have two questions as well. The question number one relates to Hino Motor Corporation. And because of the misconduct with respect to exhaust gas, and that really lost and impaired the trust and confidence of consumers, and also that really required improvement of a corporate culture. And because of the stoppage of a shipment, the financial well-being of the company is in question. So there are huge and mounting challenge of Hino. As a parent company, how TMC assesses and considers this Hino's problem, and going forward, because of so many challenges facing Hino, the human resources, goods, and financial resources, what sort of assistance and support does Toyota intend to provide to Hino? Second question, you talked about the product-driven management, and you also talked about the efforts for continuous improvement. I would like to ask about your future approach going forward. Thus far, the world has been focused on internal combustion engines, but it is quite true that the increasingly vehicles will be battery EVs. In the case of battery EVs, probably battery cost will be about one half of the overall cost. But in the age of electrification, that would result in different cost structure. How do you intend to keep your cost competitiveness or competitiveness of your products overall? These are my two questions. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi. We received two questions. The question number one related to Hino Motor, relating to the misconduct of that. And as a parent company, how does Toyota respond to that? And Kon, if as the Vice President, will respond to that question. Second question related to the product-driven management, which Kon talked about in the earlier presentation. In relation to that, in the electrification, including the cost of battery EV, what would be the cost improvement efforts, and also how we will address that. And Maeda EVP will respond to the second question. So, Mr. Kon, please. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi, for your question. With respect to the first question that relates to the Hino Motors, Hino is a consolidated subsidiary of TMC. And the Hino Motor was engaged in the misconduct relating to the exhaust gas and also fuel consumption efficiency. Then customers, the dealers, the suppliers, and also the regulatory authorities who all supported Hino to date received tremendous inconvenience because of this. And the confidence and trust they placed on Hino was completely lost. And as a parent company, I feel really sorry for that. It is indeed very regrettable what Hino did. Hino is a consolidated company engaged in the production and manufacturing of commercial vehicles. And in terms of the supervisory and oversight responsibility for Hino as a parent company, we intend to support Hino and its efforts to restore the confidence of those stakeholders. And as a parent company, we intend to work with Hino to restore such confidence. That, I think, is a role to be played by a parent company. Currently, the Special Investigation Committee composed of outside experts are now investigating the root cause of this problem, and will pay attention to the outcome of that special committee. And bearing that in mind, in terms of the governance of Hino Motors, but not limited to that, the reform of the corporate culture, the promotion of business, including those aspects of Hino Motor, and placing the greatest priority on the efforts to restore confidence and trust of stakeholders and customers. So we really caused this inconvenience, for which we are sincerely sorry for that. That's my response to the first question. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi. So with respect to the second question, allow me to respond to that aspect. In the age of electrification, how Toyota is going to keep its competitiveness? That was a question. The competitiveness, what does that mean, actually? As far as we're concerned, the fact that our customers choose our product is the indication of our customers. We think that it is the customers who has the final final say on the product decision. Whether our product can be chosen by the customer is the key. And I think there are various different reasons and factors based upon which the choice and decision is made by customers. As Nagata mentioned, some customers will focus on affordable but high quality, but in other segments, customers might refer to value-added aspect which enhance their lifestyle or they enjoy. And in certain areas where the usage is made in the adverse natural environment, the durability may be the very important factor for the choice of vehicles. So, as Kon mentioned in his own presentation, we will continue with those activities as a part of our efforts to improve operating structure. We had in-house company system. Through that, we focused on what sort of business we are doing on the global scene, what sort of product lineup we have, and paying attention to those different in-house companies focused on their own lineup and made efforts to respond to the customers of those different items. In the past, we tend to focus on volume or margin, but rather some of those in-house companies compete against other in-house companies, so that ultimate efforts will be made to deliver ever better cars to customers, the best vehicles to customers. And if we can share with you slide number 31, this shows one of the characteristics of Toyota. In the different regions of Toyota, where are the regions in which Toyota is doing business? Toyota can be on the top. So it's not that our business is biased in any specific region. We talked about full lineup operation globally. In many different regions, the customers in those different regions throughout the world, as a B2C company, we are allowed to do business. So amongst many different regions, we do receive feedback from customers in different regions. And unless we operate through best-in-town company, we won't be able to capture those feedbacks. In the past, we tend to focus on a certain area, just services, but through those best-in-town companies, every effort is made to receive feedback from customers. In-house company system is one effort of that, and also focusing on being the best in town is that. So offer value to customers even after the delivery of products and receive feedback from customers. And this reflects the result of efforts Toyota made over the years to improve operating structure. And by doing so, we can develop human resources. So this efforts to improve operating structure also include as one aspect the human resource development as well. And that results in enhanced competitiveness. And those efforts should be continued on a sustainable manner. For the customers to choose Toyota on a sustainable manner, we need to continue with those efforts. There is no end of our efforts for operating structure improvement. Continuous pursuit will lead to the continued customers chosen by the customers. And added to that would be the strength of software going forward. That will represent one new element. So together with Woven Planet, we intend to increase our strength in this software aspect. The vehicles tend to be focused on hardware, but including software going forward, we intend to meet more diversified needs and desire of customers. And standing by the customers with different needs, we intend to enhance our competitiveness because that leads to the better products and improvement of our attractiveness. And I think the only way is to simply make those efforts in a dogged manner. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi.
Now let us move on to the next question from Yomiuri. Yamamoto-san, please. We will switch the screen, so when you see yourself on the screen, please start your question. We are switching the screen now. Mr. Yamamoto, thank you for waiting. Can you hear me? Can you repeat yourself? Do you hear me? Yes, please. My name is Yamamoto from the Yomiuri Shimbun, the newspaper. The first question, the forecast for this year. In the United States and Europe, inflation, and China has the zero COVID-19, and there is a concern of recession. This year, overseas sales is expected to be 1.5 million. So, in this environment of recession, how do you see the market developing? Now, domestic production 3 million. That was in the forecast again. For TMC, 3 million in Japan. What does it mean to Toyota? Thank you very much to Mr. Yamamoto. The first question I want to clarify. This year, in March 2023, your question was about the overall market forecast? Yes. Then I will answer that question. And the second question was about TMC 3 million production in Japan. What does that mean for Toyota? I think that was your second question. And that would be answered by Mr. Yamamoto from Accounting Group. Your first question was about the overall market conditions. This fiscal year, it's going to be even more difficult than other years to make a forecast. As Mr. Yamamoto mentioned, overall, globally, if there is any positive factor, China still has many restrictions with the zero COVID-19 policy, but overall, a recovery from COVID-19 is going to be a big positive factor. And if you look at the negative factors, as we mentioned in a financial results announcement, the raw material prices are soaring, and the inflation in various areas will have an impact on the daily lives of people. So there's inflation, and then there is the Ukrainian factor, and that is causing a lot of concerns in many areas. And next, supply constraints of semiconductors and other parts will be a major limitation in the automobile industry. So these factors will be compounded this year. By region forecast is also very difficult. Let me give you a rough outline of what we are thinking now. China and the United States, roughly speaking, in the year ending March 2022, compared to the year ending March 2022, we will see a slight improvement. And Japan and Asia, we have the positive and negative factors that I mentioned before, and if you add them together, it will be about plus minus zero. So the market will be about the same as fiscal 2021, and the most difficult region to forecast, I think, is Europe. Energy, materials, the Russian-Ukraine issue will have a major impact, and that will have an impact on the economy in general. So we think the risk will outweigh opportunities. So for the European market, I think it will be below fiscal 2021. Those are the rough outlooks of forecasts for the major markets. But that is for now. But the situation in COVID-19 and the Ukrainian situation will change rapidly day to day. So if the assumption in the general market changes, that means a change in the standard. So we will have to make changes to our business so that we can see improvements in cost, profit structure, and delivery to our customers. And towards that end, we will continue to make efforts on a day-to-day basis. That is all from my side.
トヨタに国内300万台 国内の生
3
産のことに
million
ついてのご質問だったと思いま
units
すが、
production in
山本の方から
Japan.
お答え
That
さ
was
せ
the
ていただきます。
second question, I
これ
believe,
も
and this is Yamamoto
私
speaking.
の話というより伺った話の引用で申し訳ないんですけ
This
れ
is
ども、
something
や
I
はり
heard from another person.
東日本大震災の後に
Say,
ですね、
after the Great East
東
Japan
北に
earthquake
工場を作り、そこ
in
に
Tohoku, we set up
製
the
造基盤
factory
といいますか、産業の基盤といいます
and
か、
we set
雇用
up
です
a
とか、
foundation
そうい
for
ったことを
industry, including
作って
employment.
きたこと、これが結果的に
And
ず
as a
っと
result,
ずっと日本の自動車産業といいますか、
to the
やはり
Japanese
日本が
auto
その資源を外
industry,
から買ってこなきゃいけない中でですね、
which
じゃあどうやっ
has
てその
to
外貨を
purchase materials
獲
from
得してくるのか
outside
と
of
いうところ
Japan
がやっぱり
and
自動車産業の一つの
has
貢献している
to
役目
earn foreign currencies from outside of Japan. We have been able to make a contribution. Japan, we are a global company, but Japan is our home country, and we think people are supporting us in our efforts that we are doing in this country, and that's what the 3 million units means to TMC.
それでは次のご質問に参
Thank
り
you,
ます。
Mr. Yamamoto. Let us move on to the next question.
NHK タルノ
From
様、
NHK,
お願いいたします
Taruno-san, please.
画面を切り替えますので、
I
ご
will
自身の
switch
映
the
像が画面
screen,
上
so
に
if
表
you
示
see
されましたら
yourself
ご
on
発
the
言ください
screen,。please start speaking.
ただいま画面を切り替えてお
We
り
are
ま
now
す。
switching the screen.
NHK のタルノと申します。
Taruno of NHK, can you hear me?
お願いします。
Yes, I can.
私からも2点お願
I
いい
also
たし
have
ます。
two questions
1点
to
目です
ask.
ね。
Question
ウ
number
クライ
one
ナロシア情勢
that
に
relates
絡
to
んでですね、
Ukraine and
ロシア
Russian
事業に関
situation.
し
In
て
relation to that, your
今後
business
ですね、
in
どのように
Russia,
やってい
how
くのか
are
とい
you
うことをお
going
聞かせくだ
to
さい。今現
do
状ですね、
with
物
your
流の
Russian
混乱で停
business?
している状
Currently,
況だと思います
you
けれども、
suspended your
こ
operation
のロシア
because
事
of
業
the
ですね、
confusion
ま
in
だ
logistics,
先
but
行き見通し
Russian
にくい状
business,
況が
the
続くと思
outlook
うんですけれ
remains
ども、
very uncertain, very
今
difficult
現
to
状
read
どうな
what's
のか、
going
そして
to
今後
happen
どうい
in
う
the
ふうにしてい
future.
くのか
What's the
という
current
ところをお
status
聞かせいただけ
and
れば
what
と
are you
思い
going
ま
to
す。
do
で
with your
もう一
business
点
in
がです
Russia?
ね、先ほど最
The
初の質
second
問でも出ま
question,
した、
as
価
was
格転
mentioned
嫁
in
につ
the
いてお
first
伺いしたいと
question
思います。
with respect
昨
to
日の
the
決算会見で
passing
も原材
the
料の
higher
高騰
cost
がかつてない
prices,
規模
in
で
this meeting it was
上昇して
mentioned
いると
that
1兆
there
円以
has
上と
been
いうことをですね、見込ん
unprecedented
でおられる
raw
という
materials
中
cost
で、
increase
その先ほど、
exceeding 1 trillion
ひょ
yen.
っとしたらまあお客様
And
によっては
earlier,
ですね、
depending
も
upon
う少しお
customers,
金を頂戴した
you may
する
be
ことも
able
ということ
to
をお話し
receive
され
a
てました
higher
けれども、
amount of
これは
consideration
日
for
本市
the
場も含め
products
てという理解
you
でよ
offer
ろ
to
しい
the
でしょうか。
customers.
なかな
Am
か
I right in
日
understanding
本市場
that
をです
that
ね、
includes
どの
Japanese
ように
market as
価
well?
格転嫁をしていくのか
How
という
can
の
you
は、
pass
まあ
the
判断
higher
難しい部
cost
分も
to
あるかと思うんで
prices
す
in
け
the
れども、
Japanese market? I
日
think
本
it
市
is
場
a very
で
difficult decision
ま
to
あ
make.
長引くデフレが
So
続いている
here
この日
in
本
the
市場でで
Japanese
すね、ど
market,
のよう
where
にこの
deflationary
原材料
trend
高
still
騰っていうと
continues,
ころを
how are
吸
you
収してい
going
くのか
to
というところをお聞
absorb
かせく
the
ださい。以上
impact
です。
of higher raw materials prices in the
はい
Japanese market?
タロンさんありがとうございます。
Thank you, Mr.
ご
Taruno.
質問の1点目は、
The first question
今のウクライナの状況に
related
関
to
連
the
して、
current situation in
トヨタ
Ukraine
のロシア事
and
業をどうしていくのかっていうこと
what
を教えてほしいと
Toyota
い
is
うこと
going to
だと
do
思いま
with
した。で
Toyota's
これは
business in
私
Russia.
方の方からご
And
説
I
明
will
申し上げま
respond
す。
to that question.
続いてこの
Nagata
価格の話は
speaking.
先
And
ほ
with
ど私
respect
ご
to
説明申し上
prices,
げたん
I
ですが、改めて今非常にデフレで環境の厳しい日
answered
本
the
での
earlier
価格
question
帯
in
を
the
どうする
same
のかってい
line.
う
In the
ご質
very
問だと思いま
difficult
すので、
deflationary
これも引き
trend,
続
what
き
we are
私
going
の
to
方から
do with the
ご説明申
pricing
し上げたい
level
と思います。
was the question. So
でま
let
ず
me just
ロシア
respond
の
to
事
both
業
of
と
these
いうこと
questions.
なん
With
で
respect
あります
to
けれども、
Toyota's
本
business
当に
in
今
Russia,
年の2月24日、これは皆様も
since February
忘れもされないような
24,
光景だと
and
思うん
I'm
です
sure
け
you
れども、
still remember the very
ここでこの日
vividly
に
in
ロ
terms
シア
of the visual
本当にウ
impact
クライ
of
ナ
that.
に侵攻
The
が
Russia
始
made
ま
an
り、そ
invasion
こから
into
非常に多
Ukraine,
く
and
の
starting
尊
from
い
that,
人命が失われたと思
many
います。
precious lives have
で
been
こういっ
lost
た中で
due to that.
加えましてその安全な
And
暮
in
らし
addition
が
to
脅
that,
かされるですと
safe
か、あるい
livelihoods
はヨー
are
ロ
being
ッパ中心、
threatened,
日本
and
も
especially in
そういった
Europe.
影響にも入ってき
And
て
of
るんです
course,
けれども、
Japan was no
エネルギー
exception,
あるいは
but
食料まで
energy
が
and
今
food are
不足し始め
becoming
ている
scarce.
し始めている るという現実だと思い
So
ま
that's
す
the
し、
reality
こういっ
that
たこと
we
は
are confronted
世界の
with.
多くの方々と
And
共に
many people
私どもトヨ
throughout
タ
the
としても
world,
非常に
together with
心を
them,
痛めている
we in
状況でござい
Toyota
ま
are
す。
indeed
で私たち
heartbroken
トヨタは
and
こういった
seriously
信
worried.
仰、それからその結果生ま
We
れて
at
生じた
Toyota believe
戦
that
争からはで
happiness
す
is
ね、
never
本
born
当に幸せは決
from
して生まれない
aggression and a
という
war
ふうに
caused by
思っておりますの
aggression.
で、一刻も早く
We
ウクライナを
sincerely
はじめ
hope
世界
that
に
peace and
平和と安
security
全、
be
これが取
restored
り戻
to
されることを
Ukraine
切
and
に
the
願ってい
world
るという
as
のが
soon as
私ども
possible.
の
That's
強
an
い思いでご
ardent
ざいます。
desire.
で私たちトヨタには
furthermore,
世界中に約
Toyota
1億台、
has
1億人の方のですね、
customers who
固有
own
のお客様が
approximately
いらっしゃいます。
100 million
これに
vehicles
加えまして支
worldwide,
え
and
て
in
くださってい
addition
る
to
世界
that,
中
there are
の
many
数多くのステ
stakeholders
ー
who
クホルダーの
support
皆様がいら
Toyota
っしゃいます。
throughout the world,
でロシアの
numerous
事業の問題につき
stakeholders.
ましては、
And with
そ
respect
うし
to
た
our
方
business
々
in
の
Russia,
ご理解、それから共感を得るという事
we'll
項をぶらさず
try
にですね、
to keep our
今の
approach
戦
of
況、ウ
gaining
クライ
the
ナの状況を見
understanding
な
and
がら
empathy
どう
of
対応
our
していけるか
many
ということを
stakeholders and people,
現
including
段
in
階では
Russia
考え
as
続
well.
けてまいります
And what
というのが
we'll
今
be
の
able
私ど
to
もの考
do
え
is
方でござい
something
ま
that
す。
we will consider to
ロシアの問
we
題
will
自体以上で
continue
ござい
to
ます。
consider and wrap our brains
そ
to.
れか
So
ら
that's
日
all
本の価
with
格
respect to
の点で
Russian
ございます
issue.
が、先ほど
With respect
本
to
当
the
に地域
prices
の
here in
状
Japan,
況ですとか、
which might
国
reflect
の
the
経済、
higher
あるいは
cost
使っている方の
depending
状
upon
況
the
によって
conditions of
大
a
変難しい
region
ところそうでない、
or
少しはいただける
depending
んじゃない
upon
か
the
ということを申し上
people
げたん
who
ですけれ
use
ども、
vehicles as an essential
太郎さんお話
means
あり
for
ましたように、日
business,
本
and
とい
in
うのは
some
全体
cases
的
it
に
may be easier to pass on cost
景
and
況感
others
という
not
か、
so.
成
As
長
Mr.
率も
Taruno
非常
knows,
に
here in Japan,
足踏みをして
the
いる
business
地域でもあり
confidence
ます
is
し、
very low,
なかな
the
か
business sentiment
いわゆ
remains
る国民の皆様の可処分所得
very
も上がっていか
stagnant,
ない
and also the
地域になろ
disposable
うと思いま
income
す。
of
で
people
この中で
is very
価
difficult
格
and
を上げるの
slow
か上げな
to
いのか
increase. So
って
in
いう
that
ところ
general
は、
context,
先
are
ほ
we
ど申し
going
上げ
to
ました
raise
ように、日
price
本
or
の中
not?
で
As
やっ
mentioned
ぱり
earlier,
日
within
常の足
Japan
に
and the
使
Japanese
われているよう
context,
な軽
in
と
the
か、
case
あ
of
るいはコンパ
vehicles,
クトとか、
especially
まあ
mini vehicles or
メディアで
compact
もそういう方々
vehicles,
たくさんいらっしゃるんですけれども、そういったと
who
ころ
use
から
vehicles
まあ
for
価格調達は非常に
as an essential means of their business, to raise prices charged to those people, I think is very difficult to do. But having said that, depending upon vehicles in different forms, there are sort of vehicles on which we can charge higher prices. So in that sense, by looking at each model one by one, and we are now studying in a very detailed, fine-tuned manner what would be the best approach that we can take. I hope you will understand what we have in mind in that. So it's how Japanese customers using vehicles for their, in this current environment, we are making efforts so that customers will be satisfied and be happy being able to buy our cars in this very difficult environment. And that's how I really understand our approach. Thank you, Mr. Taruno.
ありがとうございました。
それでは次のご質問に参ります。
Now let us move on to the next question
ではウォールストリートジャーナル
from Wall
ショ
Street
ーン様
Journal.
お願いいたします。
Mr. Sean, please.
画面を切り替えますの
We
で、ご
will
自
switch
身の映
the
像が画面
screen,
上
so
に
when
表
you
示
see
されましたら
yourself
ご
on the
発言く
screen,
ださい。
please start your question.
Sean McLean from the Wall Street Journal. Can you hear me okay?
はい、聞こえております。お願いします。
We hear you.
So I have a question about rising prices as well, and I'd like to ask particularly about the U.S. market because I think it's a big source of your profits. We're around record highs in transaction values in the U.S. of around $46,000. And what I'm wondering is, Toyota at all concerned about affordability of its products, particularly in the U.S., where maybe the average person can no longer afford a new car, and what Toyota is thinking about, if anything, doing about that? And the second question is about hybrid sales. I notice your electrified vehicle sales have started to increase. And while I understand that that might partly be influenced by the sort of model mix you have in the country, given production shortages, where do you see hybrid sales going in the next year or two? Do you think there's a lot of room to grow hybrids around the world, but particularly in the U.S.?
で Thank you very much, Mr. Sean. The first question was about the prices in the U.S. market. For Toyota customers, are we concerned about it being too high for Toyota customers? And that will be answered by Mr. Kon, EVP. The second question was that over the 1 or 2 years, do we see hybrid vehicle sales to grow globally? And if it is to grow, in which areas will that grow? And that will be answered by EVP Mr. Maeda, starting with Mr. Kon, please.
続けてよろしいですか。はい。じゃあ1点目に質問にご回答申し上げます。
So I will answer your first question.
北米の価格についてですけれども、
about prices in North America. As Mr. Sean mentioned, it's not just for Toyota, but for North America overall, prices are going up.
やはりそういう中でですね、私どもメーカーとして
As a
やっていけ
manufacturer,
ることはですね、お
what
客
we
様
can
に
do
さま
is
ざまな
to
選択肢というんでしょうか、
provide
み
various
たいなものを
options
提
to
供していく
customers.
ということではないかというふうに思います。
That is what
私
we
ども
believe.
先ほども申し上げましたが、
As
グ
we
ローバル
mentioned
で
before, on a global
多く
basis,
のラインナップを持ってお
we
りま
have
す。
a wide
アメリカで
lineup,
は
product
やはり
lineup.
SUV と
In
か
the United States,
が
we have
ピックアップ
SUVs,
トラックが中
SUVs,
心
pickup
と
truck
なりますけれども、
are the main lines of
私
products.
どもまだ
But
セダンですとか
we
ハ
also
ッチバッ
have
クという
sedans,
ような非常にコンパクト
hatchbacks.
な車もラインナップとして
These
非常に重要
compact
な
cars are also part of our
お客
lineup.
様にお求めい
These
ただ
are
ける
important
重要なラインナッ
products
プも持っております。
that
そうした
we
ラ
are
インナ
offering to our
ップを
customers.
引き続きお客様に提供していくというこ
And
と
we
と、
will continue to
あとは
provide that
その
wide
売り
variety of
方とい
product
うんでしょう
lineup
か、
to our
売却の
customers.
方法につい
And
ても
in
単純に
addition to that,
新車を売却するっていうこと
rather
ではな
than
くて、
just selling new
例えばリー
vehicles
ス
to the
ですと
customers,
か、
we also
日本でやってい
offer
る、
leasing
フルサービスリース、
options
日本ではキント、
like
最
full
近グローバル
service
でもキン
lease.
トという
In Japan, we
や
have
っておりますけ
Kinto,
れど
and
も、
also
そうい
recently
ったブランド
globally,
で
we
や
also
ってい
have
るような
Kinto.
提供
So
の仕方みたいな
how
ことも
to
さまざまな
supply
選択として
vehicles
ご用意していくのが
is
やっぱり
also
今後非常に重要なことではないかというふうに思っております。
having a wide variety or a wide, broad lineup on. And when we listen to what the dealers are saying in the
どちらか
past,
というとインセンティブの
incentives
値段交渉というんでしょうか、みたいなものが
price
多
negotiations
かったというふうに聞いておりますが、
took
最
place
近は非
frequently,
常に在庫が少な
but
いということもあっ
recently,
て、
partly because inventory is
いわゆ
low,
るどのパイプラインにどういう車がある、でその
which
車が
vehicle is
ど
in
ういうオプ
which
ションがあって
pipeline
そ
and
のオプ
which
ションというのは
vehicle
どういう
comes
ふう
with
に
which
お客様
options
にとってメリットがある
and what
っていうようなですね、
advantages
どちらかという
those
とその商
vehicles
品の
provide
会
to
話というんでしょ
the
うか、
customer.
そういったものが
These
販売店
kinds
では増えて
of
きているというふうに
conversation
聞いてお
take
ります。
place at
非
dealers,
常にいい
focusing
こ
on
と
the
だというふうに
product.
思っておりますし、
And I think
それに
this
加
is
えて
very
先ほど
good.
申し上げたような、いわゆるお客様にとって
for the
モデルの
customer,
選択肢、あとは
more
まあ
options
買
for
い方の
models,
選択肢、
more
みたいな
options
こと
on
を
how to
私
purchase
どもは提供し
vehicles.
てお客様に選んでいただくと。
We
い
will
うことを
provide these
進め
various
てまいりたい
options
という
and
ふうに
have the
思い
customer
ます。
choose.
1点目は以上でございます。
So that is all for the first
はい、
point.
続きまして2点目の質問に回答
And
させていただき
let
ま
me
す。
answer the second
今
question.
後、米国を含めてですね、1、2年
So
で
in the future, including the United States, in 1 or 2 years, will hybrid sales go up? I think that was the question. If you look back, in the United States, when fuel prices go up, hybrid vehicle sales tended to go up in the past. So taking that history into consideration, currently we are seeing soaring crude oil prices. And not only in the United States, but globally, at least I think we can expect an increased trend of hybrid vehicle sales globally. So there's another factor behind hybrid vehicle sales going up in the United States. The latest product, RAV4, In the past, hybrid vehicles tended to focus on fuel economy, but the U.S. customers not only focus on fuel economy, but also they focus on driving comfort, including good acceleration. So the new RAV4 has strengthened that characteristics. And the RAV4 hybrid that is currently on the market, and the plug-in hybrids are also very favorably accepted by our customers. So that is the voice we hear from the market. So alongside the best-in-town activities, we will listen to the customer's voice in the United States to strengthen our products. We do think the market will grow, and taking into consideration the environmental issue, I think we should grow sales of hybrid vehicles. That is all. Thank you very much to Mr. Sean.
それでは予定の時間が近づいておりますので、
The
最後は
scheduled concluding time is approaching, and therefore I would like to ask the final question.
お願いいたします。
Mr. Igarashi of Newspeak.
画面を切り替えますので、ご自身の映像が画面上に表
The
示されました
screen.
ら
So if you see
ご記入ください
yourself on the screen, please start speaking.
はい、木嵐様お願いします。
Kiara-san of Newspeak,
スピッ
please.
クスの木嵐です。よろしくお願いします。
Kiara-san of Newspeak, thank you very much. I have two questions as well, if I may.
まず1点目なんですけ
The
ども、
first
先ほど
question,
の質問ともちょっと被る部分があるん
this
で
is
すが、
somewhat
ベムの市
redundant
場
from
環境に
the
ついて
previous
どのようにご覧になっている
question,
か
but
聞きたい
what
です。
is your
資料
view
の中
of
で
the BEV,
販売の見
BEV?
通しのところで
In one of the pages, you talked about the
600%
outlook
近い
of
93%
sales.
ですかね。
You
増
talked
加
about the increase
を
of
見込んでいる資料があったと思います。これ
93%,
まで
close to 600 increase in the BEV sales.
ベムについてまだまだやっぱり
In the past, when you had discussion with respect to battery electric vehicles, many customers buy BEVs as the second car, not the first primary car. But in terms of the recent situations, and also considering the prevailing situations, the RZX and DC4X, including those, what is your view of the demand for BEVs? That's the first question. Secondly, in the earlier response to the question with respect to the change in the earning structure after the global financial crisis, and in a sense, you described what has been done thus far, which resulted in the current situation in terms of operating structure. So in that general context, for the current fiscal year starting from the 1st of April, you re-established the introduced executive vice president. You have been trying to reduce the number of directors or executives and try to accelerate the decision-making speed. That's what we've been talking about. So what is the objective of restoring the position of executive vice president? What is the view? And how the Toyota's management is going to evolve and transform going forward, especially starting the current fiscal year? Those are my two questions. Thank you, Kiara-san. The first question relates to the market of battery EV. What sort of change is foreseen? And Maeda EVP will respond to that question. The second question related to the new executive lineup, which restore the position of executive vice president. And so what is the objective of that in the current fiscal year? And what sort of a change or transformation in the management structure is considered? It was the second question. Kon will respond to that as executive vice president. Mr. Maeda, please. Thank you, Mr. Kiara, for your question. In terms of the market trend of battery EV, that was a question, according to my understanding. And what I feel most important is that vis-a-vis the battery electric vehicles, the development in relation to that has been accelerating in the market. That relates to the fact that there is a broader product lineup in various OEMs, and also there are a greater number of options available for battery EVs. That's one aspect. And also in the United States, there has been tightening trend for regulations that cannot be disregarded. Globally speaking, such a very tough and rigorous regulation established was done for the first time in the United States. The United States is leading in that trend. And not just Toyota, but for other OEMs in the automotive industry, that is one factor accelerating various efforts by OEMs. This is called greenhouse gas regulations. So those regulations and also the market trend has been strengthening more than we had expected in the past. So as far as Toyota is concerned, you talked about RZ and BZ. We are yet to start receiving orders, but looking at the input in the market and general discussion in the market on those, there seems to be a heightened expectations for those models. And therefore, looking at the input or reaction of a customer in the market, and also different reactions of different regions of the global or worldwide, and those regulatory trends, and therefore the battery electric vehicles will get accelerated. I think there are greater factors that lead us to think in that way, but at the same time, there are concerning factors as well. As was mentioned in the presentation, soaring market material prices tend to become more manifest and more seriously in the case of the BEVs. As was mentioned in the presentation, the higher cost of materials of battery does have a huge impact in the overall cost structure. We talked about the possibility of reflecting costs on prices, but we have to take a good balance, and also in different regions, different sort of subsidies may be considered for those vehicles. And therefore, currently they tend to be more generous for those environmental vehicles, but customers are very sensitive to those developments. So we tend to take a very conservative approach in responding to that. So that's my response to your first question. Thank you.
Thank
you. With respect to your second question, in terms of the current executive lineup was the focus of your question. Since the global financial crisis, the lineup of executive officers and the system of senior advisors to the board, which was eliminated, and also with respect to the members of the board, we had more than 100 in the past, but currently internally with TMC only 6, including outside board members, including them 9. So the board has been downsized substantially, and that's not the only change. For the purpose of sharing information using IT tools used for meetings and CEOs scattered throughout the world, and Toyota located in Japan, including them. We have weekly meetings so that information can be shared thoroughly and quite swiftly. So 13 years ago, this is something unthinkable and unimaginable, and this sort of change has been actually implemented and achieved. Starting in April of this year, you talked about the position of Executive Vice President restored, and I think there is very significance in that. Looking at myself, and what I personally consider is that, as Toyota, as president, says often, we live in a world where there is no right answer known to all of us. And in that world full of uncertainty, how can we manage and steer Toyota going forward? As far as TMC is concerned, if we can discover a problem, TMC does have an ability to find solutions to those problems, which was demonstrated in the past. I think Toyota is a company that has ability to find solutions to various challenges or problems, but we'll be faced with diversifying society characterized by variety of problems. Nobody knows what's going to happen going forward. So in that general context, ability to find and discover problems becomes very important. In the past, Toyota, as a president, was the only person trying to find and discover problems in many cases. But with 3 executive vice presidents working together with the president and trying to discover the problems in the world in which there is no right answer, we'll try to take countermeasures. Because there is no right answer known, we may not be able to find the right solution right away, but by discovering those problems, we'll just implement various potential countermeasures, and that, I think, is what we are aiming at. So with that aim in mind, we will pursue our work going forward, and I hope you will continue to support us as we make those efforts going forward. That's all from me.
木嵐様、ありがとう
Thank
ご
you
ざい
very
ま
much.
した。
Thank you, Mr. Kiyarashi.
それではこれにて決算説明会を
Now,
終了さ
with
せてい
this,
ただきま
we
す。
conclude
本
the
日はお
financial
忙しい
results
中ご視聴いただきまして
press
ありがとうございまし
briefing.
た。
Thank you very much for listening despite your busy schedules today. Thank you.